I'm back. Are you still here, class? Please raise your hand kung ari na ka mo di. Pabalik na. Okay, sino ang nakabalik na? Tornado ko naman. Okay, sige. I hope na ara pa kamo ha, kagapamati pasang aton nga lesson, no? So, last na lang, utility. So, this one is new. So, wala ko na siya na-include sang sang nag-psych assessment kita kasi do bonus na lang nga lesson. But, utility, I'll just discuss this, kahapyaw lang. Okay, so, what is utility? So, we may define utility in the context of testing and assessment as the usefulness or practical value of testing to improve efficiency. So, how valuable or how useful is the test naton, no? Ang ginahatag. Kay, syempre, di ba, nag-mention na ako sa una siguro sa inyo nga, mahal magbakal sa psychological test class. So, like, ang cheapest siguro that you could buy is 20,000 pesos. That's the cheapest that you can buy. And the most expensive one, gaabot sa 100,000. So, diba? So, like, if you're gonna make your own clinic, so those are some costs that you need to remember, diba? So, like, kung mag-invest ko sa amon nga test, how useful it is sa akon nga practice kung maging psychologist na ko or maging psychometrician ko. So, amo man ang akon nga ginapanumdum whenever I purchase test, diba? So, in the language of psychometrics, utility is also referred to test utility means that the same thing. It refers to how useful the test is. More specifically, it refers to the practical value of using a test to aid in decision making. So, usually, ang ginatanaw na di sa utility, it's more on the decision-making process. Like, for example, will it help us in hiring the right employees? Okay, will the test help us in that decision-making? Or will the test help us in diagnosing someone with a mental disorder? So, that's utility. So, when we say psychometric soundness, a test is said to be psychometrically sound for a particular purpose if reliability and validity coefficients are acceptably high. An index of reliability can tell us something about how consistently a test measures what it measures, and an index of validity can tell us something about whether a test measures what it purports to measure. But an index of utility can tell us something about the practical value of information derived from on a test. So that's also one of the factors that affects the test utility, ang psychometric soundness niya, whether the test is reliable or valid. So, rule of thumb, gali class, basi ma-mention man ni Ma'am Wong yun. So, the cheat sheet ninyo. So, for example, may question na, nga, okay, amo ni ang reliability is 0.80. Is 0.80, yes. Pero ang reliability niya is, for example, 0.90. Okay, so ano mahambal natin sa test nga na? So, is it psychometrically sound? So, ang rule of thumb ko sa inyo is, ang ceiling, when we say ceiling, amo ng pinaka-highest point is ang reliability. So, dapat ang validity mo must not be more than your reliability coefficient. So, if amo ng question be nga 0.90 ang validity coefficient, ang reliability coefficient is 0.80. So, mahambal naton nga base ang aton nga test is may less siya nga psychometric soundness kay mas lapaw kaya ang validity index kaysa sa reliability index. So, dapat ceiling lang siya. So, dapat with below, hindi siya dapat tamaan ka below sa reliability, hindi man siya dapat tamaan ka taas sa reliability. So, siya ang ceiling point. So generally speaking, the higher the criterion-related validity of test scores for a particular decision, the higher the utility the test is likely to be. So, amo ng inyong rule of thumb ha. So, kung ang criterion-related validity is high, okay, so meaning the utility is also high. So, there are exceptions to this general rule. This is so because many factors entered into an estimate of test utility, and there are great variations in the ways which the utility of the test is determined. For now, let's simply note that if the selection ratio is very high, then most people who apply for the job are being hired. Under such circumstances, the validity of tests may have little to do with the test utility. So would it be accurate to conclude that a valid test is a useful test? At first blush, this statement may also seem perfectly logical and true. But once again, we're talking about the utility theory here. And in this case, it can be very complicated. So the answer is no. So it is not the case that a valid test is a useful test. So, okay, so it simply means that hindi ka mo dali-dali mag-assume na ang valid test is also useful test. So, complex siya, kaya sa utility theory, you're also looking into the costs and benefits of the using that certain test. So, factors that affect test utility, like I said, the costs. So, may economic costs. So, syempre, amo nang involving money. Mention the word cost and what comes to mind. Usually words like money or dollars. In consideration of test utility, factors variously referred to as economic, financial, or budget-related in nature must certainly be taken into account. In fact, one of the most basic elements in any utility analysis is the financial cost of the selection device or training program or clinical intervention under study. So, amo na. Cost. So, for example, mag-build ka mo sa inyong clinic. So, syempre, part gina sa inyong clinic ang test. Okay, so pila, ano nga mga test ang baklon ko danay? Okay, so ma-invest bala ako kagad sa Stanford Binet 5 nga test, na intelligence test. Kay ang akon nga, kay limited lang akon budget, should I go for it bala? Kay ang bilis ang Stanford Binet 5, mga 100,000. Okay, so, should I invest on that? So, cost. There are also non-economic costs or drastic cost cutting. For example, drastic cost cutting by an airline might come in the form of harm or injury to airline passengers and crew as a result of incompetent pilots flying the plane and incompetent ground crew servicing on the plane. So, kung hindi ko nipipagbaklon ang certain test that will evaluate ang sa mga pilots, gani, ang non-economic cost is ang mga liabilities. Kung base kung incompetent ang na-hire namon nga pilots tungod sa test kana. So, what are the non-economic costs? So, hindi lang money, di ba? So, may harm or injury, okay? Nga matabo if we try to not use that test. And, of course, benefits. So, benefits refers to profits, gains, or advantages. As we did in the discussing costs associated with testing and not testing, we can view benefits in both economic and non-economic terms. From an economic perspective, the cost of administering the test can be minuscule when compared to the economic benefits or financial returns in dollars and cents that a successful testing program can yield. There are also many potential non-economic benefits to be derived from thoughtfully designed and well-run testing programs. In an industrial setting, a partial list of such non-economical benefits many carrying with them economic benefits as well, would include increase in quality of workers' performance, increase in quality, decrease in time to train workers, reduction in the number of accidents, reduction in worker turnover. So, sa benefits, anong profits, gains, or advantages naton? So, sa testing, kung may mag-ubra ka mo sa unyo nga clinic, kung nag-invest ko sa SB5 subong, will that help? Will that greatly benefit me by, for example, when I rate my testing materials na, may profit bala ako sa business ko. Kaya diba kung mag-make ka sang own mga clinic, it's also business, diba? Do ka lang, self-employed ka lang, diba? So, may non-economic man. So, kumbaga, for example, kung nagbakal ko sang SB5 subong, will that help the clients that I'm servicing? Diba? So, amo na. So, what is utility analysis? So, utility analysis may be broadly defined as a family of techniques that entail a cost-benefit analysis designed to yield information relevant to a decision about the usefulness and or practical value of a tool of assessment. So, utility analysis, family of techniques, meaning damo techniques of utility analysis, damo techniques in which we can measure utility. Note that in this definition, we use the phrase family of techniques. This is because a utility analysis is not one specific technique used for one specific objective. Rather, utility analysis is an umbrella term covering various possible methods, each requiring various kinds of data to be inputted and yielding various kinds of outputs. In the most general sense, utility analysis may be undertaken for the purpose of evaluating whether the benefits of using a test or training program or intervention outweighs the cost. So, amo na ang utility analysis. Ginatanaw naton if the benefits outweighs the cost. Okay, so if there is more good than the costs. So, paano? So, expectancy data. So, di ba na-mention ko ni kanina sa validity? An expectancy table can provide an indication of the likelihood that a test taker will score within some interval of scores on a passing measure. An interval may be categorized as passing, acceptable, or failing. So, other expectancy data, such as that provided by the Taylor-Russell tables or Naylor-Shine tables, could be used to shed light on many utility-related decisions, particularly those confined to questions concerning the validity of an employment test and the selection ratio employed. So, mostly ang utility analysis ginagamit siya sa mga business, mag-hire bala, hiring sa I.O. So, tandaan nyo ni, basi magawa man sa I.O. nyo nga exam. So, expectancy data ng isa, tapos may other types, ang Taylor-Russell, kag Naylor-Shine. So, ano na sila? So, let's see what it tells us, example, advantages, and disadvantages. So, if you're gonna use expectancy table or chart, so what it's likely to tell us, the likelihood that an individual's score within a given range on a predictor will perform successfully in a criterion. For example, a psychologist uses expectancy data to determine the likelihood that the students who score within a particular range on an aptitude test will succeed in regular classes as opposed to those who are in special education. So, gina-plot niya kung anong gina-expect niya. Kung ang expectation niya is for that certain students nga who scored high, so syempre more likely, di ba? Those students who scored high more likely are to pass sa normal nga teaching. Okay? Compare sa those nga ara sa special ed nga classes. So, it's advantages, it's easy to use, graphical display can aid in decision-making regarding specific individual or a group of individuals scoring in a given range on the predictor. So, easy to use siya kay syempre do i-plot mo lang. Kung pares na sa pakita ko sa inyo nga example, pwede mo man siya mahimo ado bar graph, di ba? So, disadvantages galing dichotomize performance into successful and unsuccessful categories, which is not realistic in most situations. It does not address monetary issues such as the cost of testing or return of investment on testing. So, kay more lang siya on pass and fail. So, ang inya disadvantage. Okay, so, wala niya try to evaluate ang costs, especially isang cost niya, and ang return of investment ng benefit. So, sa Taylor-Russell tables, ano na siya? So, increase in base rate of successful performance that is associated with a particular criterion validity. Particular level of criterion-related validity. So, for example, here, a human resources manager of a large computer store uses Taylor-Russell tables to help decide whether the applicant's for sales position should be administered an extraversion inventory prior to hire. The manager wants to increase the portion of sales force that is considered successful. In particular, consistently meets the sales quota. By using an estimate of the test validity, by using a value of 0.02 based on research, the current base rate and the selection ratio, the manager can estimate whether the increase in proportion of sales force that do successfully meet their quotas will justify the cost of the testing of all sales applicants. So, ang advantages ng Taylor-Russells, it shows relationship between selection ratio, criterion-related validity, and existing base rate, facilitates decision-making with regards to test use, and recruitment to lower the selection ratio. So, ang Taylor-Russell, do pang siya, pang IO. Okay, so ang benefits naman, syempre, may sang costing, diba? Makita mo kung if worth it ba ang cost ng test sa benefits ng company. Okay, but, dali lang with plus, hindi ko balaan kung wait lang. Okay, sorry sa pasayod. So, disadvantage. So, disadvantage niya is the relationship between predictor and criterion must be linear. So, it does not indicate the likely average increase in performance with the use of tests. There is difficulty identifying a criterion value to separate successful and successful performance. It also dichotomizes performance into successful versus unsuccessful, which is not realistic and does not consider the cost of testing and comparison to benefit. So, ginabutang nila ang cost pero wala pang way to measure if the cost outweighs the benefit. Of course, may Naylor-Shine tables. The likely average increase in criterion performance as a result of using particular tests or intervention also provides selection ratio needed to achieve a particular increase in criterion performance. So, an example of using it, the provost at the private college estimates the increase in applicant pool and corresponding decrease in selection ratio that is needed in order to improve the mean performance of students it selects by 0.5 standardized units while still maintaining its enrollment figures. So it provides information, in particular average performance gain needed to use the Broadgen-Cronbach-Lesher utility formula. It does not dichotomize criterion performance. It's useful for showing average performance gain or to show selection ratio needed for a particular performance gain. Facilitates decision-making with regards to likely increase in performance with the test use and or recruitment needed to lower the selection ratio. So, but ang disadvantage niya, it overestimates utility unless may top-down selection. So, when say top-down selection, do gina-rank naton sila. And it's expressed in terms of performance gain based on standardized units, which can be difficult to interpret in practical terms. So, ano na siyang meaning sa 0.50 ng standardized units. So, anong practical niyang definition. And does not address monetary issues such as cost of testing or return of investment. So, na ang ilang advantages and disadvantages. So, mo ginato ang three main nga utility analysis na ginagamit. So, just remember them, basi magwa man siya daan sa board exam ninyo. So, ang expectancy tables or charts, ang Taylor-Russell tables, kagang Naylor-Shine. So, what is the Broadgen-Cronbach-Lesher formula? This is the independent work of Hubert Broadgen and a team of decision theorists Cronbach and Lesher has been immortalized in a formula for dollar amount of utility gain resulting from the use of a particular selection input. So, in general, utility gain refers to an estimate of benefits or monetary or otherwise of using a particular test or selection method. Okay? So, this is the Broadgen-Cronbach-Lesher formula. So, hindi ko manipagtulo ang ang formula sini, but just be familiar lang gid on anong meaning sang N, anong meaning sang T, sang R, RXY, SDY, ZM. Okay, so amo nang mga factors. So In the first part of the formula, N represents a number of applicants selected per year. P represents the average length of time in the position, meaning tenure. RXY represents the criterion-related validity coefficient for the given predictor and criterion. SDY represents the standard deviation of performance in dollars or in kung ano man nga currency of employees. And ZM represents the mean or standardized scores on the test for selected applicants. The second part of the formula represents the cost of testing, which takes into consideration the number of applicants multiplied by the cost of the test for each applicant. A difficulty in using this formula is estimating the value of the standard deviation sub y, a value that is quite literally estimated. One recommended way of estimating the standard deviation y is by setting it equal to 40% of the mean salary for the job. So, more on IO, gini ang Broad-Gen Cronbach lesser nga formula. So, just be familiar with the formula and basi mapamangkoton kamo what formula is used to measure utility gain. Ang utility gain again is estimate naton whether ang benefits would outweigh the economic costs niya when we use that certain. Okay? So, amo ni ang formula. So, the modification of the BGHT formula exists for researchers who prefer their findings in terms of productivity gains rather than financial ones. Here, productivity gain refers to an estimated increase in work output. In this modification of formula, the value of the standard deviation of productivity SD sub P is substituted for the value of the standard deviation of performance in dollar or SD sub Y. The result is a formula that helps estimate the percent increase in output expected through the use of a particular test. So this is the revised formula for productivity. So may duwa ka formula for Broad-Gen Cronbach lesser. One is for utility gain and one is for productivity gain. So sa utility gain, more on sa economic costs niya. Meanwhile, ang productivity gain, more on sa non-economic costs and benefits niya by looking into the work output. So, some practical considerations when using utility analysis. Of course, the pool of job applicants. It may be that in periods of high unemployment, there are significantly more people in the pool of possible job applicants than in periods of high employment. Closely related to issues concerning the available pool of job applicants is the issue of how many people would actually accept the employment position offered to them even if they were found to be qualified candidates. So, nang one consideration, kaya di ba may human factor man gapon so sa IO ninyo. So, recruitment does not stop until nga ma-onboard mo na imo nga employee nga na-select. So, it could be nga basi yan nag-refuse siya ang imo nga applicant tungod sa job offer. Okay? So kanugon. So, bisan taas ang iyang test kag mo ma-qualified man siya sa position, so may one factor man gyapon nga related. So, that's why ang considerations when you use utility analysis is of course ang pool of job applicants ninyo. Kung damo kamo na pool sa imo nga recruitment, okay, so at least you can use the test to determine which applicants are likely more qualified than others, than when periods being high employment. So, kumbaga halos tanan employed. So, also, another consideration gani is the complexity of the job. Okay? Complexity of the job. So, the more complex the job, the more people differ on how well or how poorly they do job, whether or not the same utility models apply to the jobs of varied complexity and whether or not the same utility analysis methods are equally applicable, they remain matters of debate. It remains a matter of debate. So, of course, the more complex the job is, of course, it will also differ on the performance of the person. Siyempre, diri man gyapon gusulod ang human factor bala. So, may ara na being for example like sa mga high turnout ng mga companies like amo maning do frustrations sa manghudong. Kaya gusto yung gid yung mang-hire. Gusto yung mang-hire, mga accountants, mga qualified. Pero kung kisa abi, may ara times nga very stressful ang ila job. Okay. And may human factor man gyapon like ang may mga certain employee siya nga under sa iya nga ga-resign. So gapamangkot siya or what is the factor B that you can't handle. Okay, so kung this from ang gambas lang ang pressure kuno sa job, tapos ang do kumbaga ang output based gid di ang do company, something like that. So para sila amo na to like the more complex the job, the difference it is sa imo nga performance. Okay, so siyempre kung hapos lang imo nga so kung sa tingin mo ang imo nga own mo bala nga self-evaluation kag sa imo nga own nga self-efficacy kumpara sa imo hapos ang ubra, you can perform well. But for others, 'di ba? So like they cannot do that. Okay, so ang reason why there are sometimes high turnout rates sa mga firms. Okay, so muna. Kay complex gid ang job kay ang work dance ang mga do ara siya sa process. So like process ang isa ka company like ginatan-aw yung how do they do their hiring, not only that recruitment right, but for example sa mga sales nila, so anong process, so ano siya may consultant doon ng ila works. Yeah, so very complex ang ila work. So that's why mo man ang frustration niya kung kisa. Okay, so other practical considerations is the cut score in use. So, also called as cutoff score, we have previously defined a cut score, which is usually numerical as a reference point derived as a result of a judgment and used to divide a set of data into two or more classifications with some actions to be taken or some inference to be made on the basis of this classification. So, a relative cut score may be defined as a reference point in a distribution of test scores used to divide a set of data into two or more classifications that is set based on norm-related consideration rather than on the relationship of the test scores to a criterion. So because this type of cut score is set with reference to the performance of a group or some targeted segment of a group, it is also referred to as norm reference cut score. So, ara man ni practical considerations man. So, how high is your cutoff score? So, muna. So, a relative cut score may be defined as a reference point in a distribution of test scores used to divide a set of data into two or more classifications that is based on norm-related considerations rather than the relationship of test scores to a criterion. Because this type of cut score is set with reference to the performance of a group or some targeted segment of a group, it is also referred to as a norm reference score. So, in contrast to a relative cut score, it is the fixed cut score, which may be defined as a reference point in a distribution of test scores used to divide a set of data into two or more classifications that is typically set with reference to a judgment concerning a minimum level of proficiency. Fixed cut scores may also be referred to as absolute cut scores. So, usually sa mag-hiring, so they really use the fixed cut scores, diba? So, dapat makalabot ka sa certain score man to be considered nga qualified. Okay? Halos same man, diba, sa aton nga proper exam. So, dapat maka-reach ka sang amo ni nga score para mahambal mo nga nakagraduate ka na gidman or graduate ka na gidman sa degree ninyo. Okay? So, may ara man multiple cut scores which refers to use or two or more cut scores with reference to one predictor for the purpose of categorizing. So, at every stage in a multi-stage or multiple hurdle selection process, a cut score is placed for each predictor used. The cut score is used for each predictor will be designed to ensure that each applicant possesses minimum level of a specific attribute or skill. In this context, multiple hurdles may be thought of as one collective element of a multi-stage decision-making process in which the achievement of a particular cut score on one test is necessary in order to advance into the next stage of evaluation of the selection process. So it's also referred to as compensatory model of selection. An assumption is that made that high scores on one attribute can in fact balance out or compensate for low scores on another attribute. So sa I think yung multi-stage or multi-hurdle selection process, so siguro ginagamit yun if we are trying to hire someone skilled or those specialized din na type of task or job. Like siguro like na-remember ko lang siguro ang do assessment nila sa mga residents ng isa ka Japanese na hospital. So like they have that small, they have the scalpels and they have their small tools. They're trying to measure the dexterity of the surgeons there. So not only, so siguro ang first stage nila, sang test nila is the theoretical test. So siguro yung hatagan sila sang test that is regarding or relating to their achievement in or prior knowledge in surgery. So then ang second nga stage naman is ang ilang practical skills is. So yun na tanaw nila kung sinong skilled maghimo sang gamay, pinakagamay nga sushi or maghimo sang origami. Doon naman nakita ko na sa YouTube daan. So, though, like, amazing. So, maybe they use multiple cut scores or they use this multi-stage nga selection process if do specific and very skill-related ang job. So, pwede man siguro sa mga executives, diba? So, if i-assign mo na nga tao as mga chief technical officer, diba? Mga chief financial officer, diba? So, or mga vice president. So, may ara kita methods for setting cut scores. So, this is the Angoff method. So, pahapyaw lang gini, I will not really discuss again. So, devised by William Angoff, this method of setting fixed cut scores can be applied to personal selection tasks as well as to questions regarding to the presence or absence of a particular trait or attribute or ability. So, as applied for the purposes relating to the determination of whether or not test takers possess a particular trait, attribute, or ability, an expert panel makes judgment concerning the ways the person with that trait, attribute, or ability would respond to the test items. In both cases, judgments of the experts are averaged to yield cut scores for the test. The person who score at or above the cut scores are considered high enough in ability to be hired or to be sufficiently high in the trait, attribute, or ability of interest. So this is a relatively simple technique and has wide appeal and works well, that is as long as the experts agree. So the Achilles heel of this Angoff method is when there is low inter-rater reliability and major disagreement regarding how certain populations of test takers should respond to test items. Okay? So, may ara man known groups methods. So, also referred to as the method of contrasting group. The known group methods entails collection of data on a predictor of interest from groups known to possess and do not possess a trait, ability, or attribute of interest. So, based on the analysis of data, a cut-off score is set on the test that best discriminates the two groups' test performance. The main problem with using known groups is the determination or of where to set the cutoff score is inherently affected by the composition of the contrasting group. So, no standard set of guidance exists for choosing contrasting group. Okay? And we also have the IRT-based method. So, ang IRT is item-related. Ano yung minisang IRT? My gosh. Nalipat ako sa minisang IRT.
Item response theory.
Yeah, item response theory. Thank you, good friends. Item-related. So, sorry kung na-forgot kung item. Kailangan mo nigaling IRT, ang item response theory is much more related siya bisa test development. So, item response theory. So, ang item response theory is gahambal nga ang the way you respond to test items. So, usually mga item difficulty, item discrimination. So, dara ang basis ang item IRT-based method. So, in the IRT framework, each item is associated with particular level of difficulty. In order to pass the test taker must answer items that are deemed to be above some minimum level of difficulty, which is determined by experts and serves cut-off score. Okay? So, ang ginagamit nila sa IRT, so for example, is item mapping method. So, a technique that was found in application in setting cut scores for licensing examinations. So, the item mapping method, it entails the arrangement of items in a histogram with each column on the histogram containing items deemed to be equivalent value. Judges who have been trained regarding minimal competence required for licensure are presented with sample items from each column and are asked whether or not a minimally competent licensed individual would answer those items correctly about half the time. So if so, that difficulty level is set as a cut score. If not, the process continues until appropriate difficulty level has been selected. So diri ginatry nila to arrange ang mga test items per column, and then they try to judge it based on whether or not ang difficulty level niya is the needed or the minimum level that a licensed individual would require. So ginaset nila so for example, hindi lang ko sure kung sa board exam ko gamit na sila item mapping method. Pero balaan ko gid nga ang difficulty level gid sa board exam is really high. Kaya makita mo pa lang sa sa national passing test, 'di ba? So mga 50% lang ang passing rate usually. Okay? So So meaning taas gid man ang ang difficulty level. So how much more pa ganito ang basang mangud ko sa latest nga board exam, do less than 20% ng ganitong nakapasar sa accountancy nga board exam. So, meaning taas gid ang difficulty level niya. So, another is bookmark method. So, an IRT-based method of setting cut scores that is more typically used in academic applications. So, use of this method begins with training of experts with regard to minimal knowledge, skills, or abilities that test takers should possess in order to pass. Subsequent to this training, the experts are given book of items with one item printed per page such that items are arranged in an ascending order of difficulty. Then the expert places a bookmark between these two pages, that is two items, that are deemed to separate test takers who have acquired minimal knowledge and skills or abilities from those who have not. So the bookmark serves as a cut. So other methods. So E.L. Thorndike proposed norm reference method for setting cut scores called the method of predictive yield. His contribution in the area of personnel psychology came in the form of a book entitled Personal Selection. In that book, he described a method of predictive yield, a technique for identifying cut scores based on number of positions to be filled. The method takes into account projections regarding the likelihood of offer acceptance, the number of position openings, and the distribution of applicants. So, ang kay E.L. Thorndike, mas ginatanaw niya ang sa cut-off scores when it comes to the employment, employee selection. So si Wei Cascio, a prolific researcher in the area of test utility, proposed the use of regression for setting cut scores when criterion-related data are available. So may arap ng discriminant analysis, also referred to as discriminant function, is a family of statistical techniques typically used to shed light on relationships between the certain variables such as scores on a battery of tests and two, in some cases, more naturally occurring groups such as persons judged to be successful on the job and the persons judged not to be successful. Okay, so that's it. That's all for utility. So again, just remember nyo na lang ang tatlo to nga utility analysis kay more likely amo ginanggagwa sa test niyo. So, ang difference between the expectancy tables, the Taylor-Russell, and the Nature-Shine tables. Okay, so, na lang, review nyo ang muna. So, ang the rest is how to do the cut-off. So, I think that's it. That's all for for my part, all of my part for psych assessment this. So, do you have any questions or concerns, class, before we go to our lunch break?
Wait lang, I have a concerns regarding sa nag-attend bala. Gamay lang gyud man nag-attend.
38. Do mga 40, 50 lang sila, Prince.
Is it because wala ko na-publish ang course? I don't know.
Hindi ba? Na-publish mo naman.
Naman 33 lang. How about pag students, please inform your other classmates, both block, kung mayroon kita di representative, to attend the review. Kay hindi na tong gusto nga basi pag-abot sa Macboard, kag ano nyo bala? Malagbong nyo. Always remember my pre-board pakitaha, dira naman ihatag ang grades. Always read the book, hindi mag-asa sa kung ano ginahambas ng teacher. Advance read gid ka mo sa mga book ng panghatag. Okay? So please inform your other classmates to attend in this class. Thank you very much.
Kung hindi man sila mag-listen sa aton Wisdom Prince, so it's not, kumaga sa aton na end, we have done our part naman. So, wala na sa mga wala ga-attend. So, it's their loss man, friends. So, it's not ours. Wala na. Para man ni sa ila, it's not for us. Wala na mahambal ko, guys. So, like I said, since ang utility is not, so you can listen to this when I upload the video, okay? May mga video recording, so you can listen to that liwat-liwat. But like I said, I think I have done everything to give you all the resources you can have. We have give you the books. We also I also told you about my YouTube channel, diba? Nahambal ko ara na datanan na lessons inyo na video recorded ko na that you can listen to, you can watch to in your own time. So yeah, so kung it's since siguro in your mindset wala man attendance, so pero like I said, it's not my loss, it's your loss. Yeah, you don't. Okay, so we also give you the study guide for this term so that you can follow what topics and read in advance. Okay, so whatever comes man sa test ninyo, okay, on our end, wala kuya guilt kay tungod nga I have given everything. I have given, do kumaga na pour ko na ang tanan kong effort nga gusto ko ihatag. Okay? So, it's still up to you. Okay? As responsible adults naman ka. So, ginahambalan na kamo, na-remindan, pero whatever comes sa result ng inyong test, it's not. Kumaga, na kami. I think we did our best to give you this review section. Okay, sige. So, any other concerns, class, before we take a lunch break? Okay, wala man. Sige. So, enjoy your lunch. So, let's be back na lang di siguro mga 1:30. Okay, 1:30. So, I will discuss naman ang mga trauma, dissociative, and somatic symptom disorder. Yun lang. Thank you very much, class. Bye-bye. See you karon.
Bye-bye.